Alright, in this video we are going to put together our account service. So the way I'm going to do this is the first thing I'm going to do is all the stuff required for the retrofit side, all the stuff for the interface. Then I'm just going to go down the list of all the methods we need to implement on the live account service and implement them. Now, funny enough, this service doesn't actually have as many calls as the other ones, or at least the contact for sure, but it happens to be the most complex. And unfortunately, it's also the one we have to do first, because if we can't log into our application, which at this point we can't, if we tried to log into the application as it stands, it would just sit there and spin forever because nobody is receiving that request. So we have to do this first. And it'll take, it'll be quite a bit of code, but it'll be worth it. And the rest of the services will be a lot easier to do. So let's start off with the interface. I'm going to jump into Live Your Web Service. And down here, I'm going to section off this interface. This is going to be a big interface. So I'm going to section it off with some nice little dashes here. And the first section I'm going to write is actually going to be at the bottom. Just like usual, I'm going to start off at the bottom and go up. And I'm going to mark this as DTOs, or data transmission objects. Now, not all of the requests that we have in responses can be serialized directly by retrofit. There are going to be a couple intermediate requests that we have to write our own classes for, and the auth has a couple of them. So the first, or actually one of them, and it's called a login response. And that's because I implemented the web service using the OAuth 2 implementation in ASP.NET, and it has a very particular way that it sends its response that isn't compatible with the rest of our system. So we have to create a nice little shim that'll kind of like private little request response cycle, and then convert that into something that the app understands. So I'm going to go ahead and create a public class login response. He'll inherit from service response because he has to, for the way I'm writing everything. And he's going to have a public string, public string expires, public string issued, public string token, public string token, public string error, and public string error description. Now, each one of these, I have to give them their own serialized names, and they're all capitalized, and that's because that's just because of the way that they're being the ON OAuth provider works. So expires, for example, is going to be dot lowercase expires, and issued is issued, and token is dot access token, error is error, and error description is error description. So we just have to override the convention of how GSON is going to deserialize this. Now let's write out all of our API endpoints. So the first one I'm going to do, I am going to go ahead and take this comment. I'm going to copy and paste it. I'm going to mark this as a count. Something else you could do, you could write your own interface for each one of the services. So you could write your account service interface and your contact service interface and all that fun stuff. I'm just doing it all in one interface because it's quick and easy. So the first one we're going to do is going to be a post request to /token. And I'm going to say form URL encoded. And then I'm going to say void login. Now this is going to be the most complex of all of our calls, because again, we're not hitting a service call that I made. We're hitting one that comes as part of the ON's OAuth 2. And we're going to have, I'll explain what these annotations mean in a second. We'll have a field username, string username, field password, string password, field client ID, string client ID, and we'll have a field grant type, string grant type, and we'll have a callback of login response. Now this is the DTO we just made down here, and we'll call this callback. So what's going on here is I'm creating a post. Now, a post request, if you're not familiar with HTTP verbs, is when you send a form. So I'm sure at some point you've submitted an online form. Like, for example, I know this isn't a this really isn't a video about web APIs or anything like that. But give me a sec for the playground to load, and I'll show you guys an example of what I mean by these verbs and how the post and form URL encoded works at a kind of lower level, so you guys might get a better idea of what's going on if you're not so much of a web developer. So here we have a normal GET request, and I can come up over here into my network, and I can see that we made a GET request to urlplayground.3dbuzz.com. But down here we have a form. And so you can see in the HTML DOM, over here on the right-hand side, we have this form element. And if I hover over it, you'll notice it highlights the rest of the form. And you'll notice it has a method of post. And really, post is used for most form submissions on the internet. And if I type something in, like some garbage here, or how about blah at example.net, now I'm going to hit generate. Now watch what happens here. When I hit generate, what's going to happen is it'll take a second because it has to spool up the connection to the database again, unfortunately. There we go. Now if I come back to the network tab, notice how we made a post request. And I can inspect that request, and I can see that if I scroll down here, I have this form data, name and email. So notice how it made a post, and I sent some form data. This is what we're emulating with this syntax. I'm saying form URL encoded, which is a specific type of encoding that most browsers understand, and then I'm saying it's an action of post. Also, in the REST world, the post verb is used to create things. So whenever you want to think of creating something, think of post. This works because we're posting to /token, and we can think of it as generating a access token. And then all of these fields are going to be sent along as form URL encoded values, which the server will understand and be able to parse. All right, let's do our login with external token. So login with external token is going to have a body of account.login with external token request, and a callback of login with external token response callback. This is how most of our calls are going to look. And he's going to be a post to /API /v1 account external tokens. That's his URL. Now, it's very important that you get these strings correct. If you don't get these strings correct, then you will receive errors that you don't have. That you'll get a 404, or if you don't get a field quite right, it won't read it. So make sure that these are spelled correctly. It doesn't matter what you spell the parameters themselves as. It just matters what's in these strings here, these string literals. But anyway, now we're doing a post, but in this case, instead of listing every single field manually like I did here, I'm annotating this parameter with body. And what it's going to do by default is it's going to send this as JSON. It's going to serialize this entire parameter and send it as the body of the HTTP request. And that's exactly what we want. And then, of course, we have our asynchronous callback right here. So this is how most of our things are going to look. So we're going to have a post API v1 account. This is going to be our register method, and he's going to have a body of account.register request and a callback of account.register response callback. So again, pretty straightforward here. We're posting to the account endpoint, sending our register request as the body. Next up, let's do our API v1 account external. So this is when we register an external account. So I'm going to say register external with a body of account register with external token request, and a callback of account.register with external response callback. Also, make sure that you're getting your requests and responses in the right place. Otherwise, things will break. All right, so now I'm going to do a get for API v1 account. Now this get is going to be responsible for retrieving account information. It's going to be called get account. It's not going to have a request. It's just going to have a callback of account dot, in this case, it's going to be login with local token request callback. So this get, just basically it accepts an auth token, but the auth token exists in everything, and it's going to retrieve my account information for me. Then I'm going to have a put API v1 account, and this is going to be called update profile, and he's going to have a body of account.update profile request request with a callback of account update profile response response, or callback. Put is another HTTP verb, and the put verb is used to update things. So see how you might be able to see how things are happening in sort of a RESTful way. We post to this URL to register a new account, to create something. We get from this URL to get information about it, to receive things but not modify anything. And we put to the same URL in order to update it. And my code's written on the server in such a way that it'll recognize these verbs and do different things depending on which verb was used. All right, let's do our update avatar. This is going to be fun. This is going to be a multi-part. So I'm going to put at multi-part, and then I'm going to say put API v1 account avatar, because we're updating our avatar. And I'm going to say void update avatar. And then I'm going to say part avatar. And this is going to be of a typed file avatar with the callback of account update avatar account dot avatar change avatar request, or sorry, change avatar response callback. So the multi-part is a different kind of encoding. So you'll notice how I have my form URL encoded, which acts like an HTML form. I use my body attribute when I want to send straight up JSON. I want to turn this object into a JSON string and send it as the complete body of the request. And then I use multi-part if I want to use multi-part. And multi-part is a type of encoding, I guess you could say, that's used to send chunks of files. It's used for file uploads. And if you want to send a file, that's what you're going to have to use. When you have a multi-part, in retrofit, you can only send parts. So notice how I marked this as a part. Instead of a body or a field, it's a part. And the parts can either be a typed file in the case of sending a file, or a typed string in the case of sending anything else. All right, let's go ahead and do a put. I'm going to do a put at API v1 account password. And this is, not surprisingly, going to be update password. This is going to have a body, so it's going to send a serialized JSON of account.changePassword request, and we'll have a callback of account change password response. So all of these are callback. All of these are asynchronous. The last thing I want to do is my GCM registration. So put API v1 account GCM registration, and this will be void update GCM registration with a body of account dot update GCM registration request and a callback of account dot update GCM response callback. And that's it. So that is basically all of the API calls I need. So let's move on to our live account service and handle all of our events. So before I do that, actually, I do want to go ahead and I'm gonna change the constructor a bit. I'm gonna add a private auth field. Let's make it a private final auth. And then inside of my constructor, I'm gonna say auth equals application dot get auth. Then I'm going to write a private method at the bottom first, and it's going to be a helper method for every single method that involves logging in. It's going to be private void login user, and he's going to accept an account.user response. Remember, our user response is the base class for any of our requests that result in logging in. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if response.auth token does not equal null and not response auth token is empty, then I'm going to say auth.set auth token to response.auth token. So if we ever got an auth token from logging in, set it here so we save it in our shared preferences and then use it for all of our subsequent requests. Then I'm going to say user equals auth get user, and I'll say user.setID. Now this is the fun part, I guess. Response.id, user.setDisplayName, response.displayName, user.setUsername to response.username. My favorite thing is repetitive code, isn't it? Set email is response.email, user.set avatar URL, response.avatar URL, user.set has password to response.has password, and user.set logged in equals true. And then finally at the end, bus, I'm going to do bus.post new account user details updated event, passing in user. So this will let the rest of the application know that our user details have been changed and they should update themselves. All right, now let's start back up at the top and implement each one of our service calls from here on down. So we'll subscribe. Remember your subscribe attribute, otherwise, or annotation, otherwise these methods aren't going to get called and your program is just going to sit there and do nothing waiting for this response. Public void register account.register request. Then I'm going to say api.register, and I'm going to pass in request and then a new retrofit callback. And for retrofit callback, I'm going to pass in account.registerRequest.class as its constructor. Unfortunately, you're going to have to pass in the class of the response multiple times here, and mainly into the constructor of the retrofit callback. Now remember, our retrofit callback is a wrapper around retrofits callback, so that's why we can use it to satisfy the asynchronous API. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if register response did succeed, then login user register response. And then I'm going to say bus.post register response. And that's it. So if we successfully logged in with this API call, log the user in, and then post it to the rest of the application so it knows that you logged in. Next up, let's log in with username. So this is going to be a final account dot login with username request. And I could do validation here to make sure that this isn't all the fields are set and everything like that. Or I could set that validation up somewhere else and maybe some sort of interceptor, but I'll leave that as an exercise for other people. So then I'll do api.login, and I'm going to pass in request.username, request.password. For the client ID, I'm passing in Android, and for the grant type, I'm passing in password. These are values that are required by the OAuth provider in .NET. Then I'm going to pass in for the callback, new retrofit callback. And this is complicated. So basically, if this succeeds, notice that I do have to pass in login response.class here at the constructor. If this succeeds, I now need to make another web request to get my account information. If it didn't succeed, I need to just early exit out and tell the UI that I didn't succeed. So I'll say, if not, login response did succeed, then I'm going to say account.login with username request, or login with username response equals new login with username response. This code would be so much cleaner if implicit typing existed in Java. Response.set property error username with the capital N, response.error or login response.error description, and then bus.post response, and then return. So notice how I'm fabricating my own response, and then I'm converting from the response that came from the way the server was written to the way that my application expects it. Then I'll say, if it succeeded, then I'm going to say auth.setAuth token, login response.token. So I'm setting the auth token with what I got. Then I'm going to say api.getAccount, and I'm going to pass in a new retrofit callback of account.login with local token response. And then I need to also pass that in here. And then I can go ahead and hit Alt-Enter to implement the method. So I get that code there. And it really doesn't like this for some reason. What did getAccount return? Login with local token response. Login with local... Oh, derp. In my... see, I made that mistake. Remember how I told you guys to get your requests and responses not mixed up? Well, I managed to do that. Make sure that this is a login with local token response. Now our code does an error, and by now, I now have my user information, but I have to handle errors. So if not, login with local token response did succeed, then I want to go ahead and do the same thing I did here. I want to say account.login with username response. Response equals new login with username response. Response dot set operation error. I'm going to set that to our login with token response dot get operation error, and then I'm going to post it. And then I'm going to return. Now, if this did succeed, then I'm going to say login user, login with local token response, and then bus.post login with a local token, or sorry, new account dot login with local token. Or sorry, login with the username response. This is probably the ugliest method in the entire service layer. So if this is bothering you, don't worry about it. That's the reason why I didn't try to introduce any other infrastructure to make this cleaner, because at the end of the day, it's only one call. All right, so now let's move on to our login with local token. So I'm going to do subscribe, public void login with local token, passing in final account dot login with local token request. And I don't think it needs to be final, but whatever. And I'll say API.getAccount, new retrofit callback post, login with local token response. And this is going to simply do login with local token response. Or sorry, login user. Actually, we're going to do retrofit callback post on this one. And then we'll import that class. Remember, his constructor does need to be provided the result type and the bus. So copy in the result type and pass in your bus. Then I'm going to say login user, login with local token response, and then I'm going to say super.onResponse, login with local token response. So again, we're just inserting a little bit of middleware here, so we intercept the result and we set our user to those values. We won't have to do this for the majority of our calls. All right, let's do our update profile. Our update profile is going to be final account.update profile request, and we're going to say API.update profile request, and then new retrofit callback post. Now, retrofit callback post will have to take in that and that, which is going to get very tiring writing all the time. And then I'm going to override the onResponse call. And in the onResponse call, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to update the user manually. So I'm going to say user equals auth get user, user.displayName, or set display name to, I'm going to change this parameter to response here. .displayName, user.set email to response.email, and then I'm going to say super.post response, and then I'm also going to say bus.post new account.user details updated event user. So not only are we sending the update profile response back to the UI, we're also publishing a user details updated event so other parts of the UI can get updated too. All right, moving right along, let's do our update avatar. Public void update avatar, and for update avatar, we'll final account dot change avatar request, and then for here we'll do API update avatar. For our typed file, I'm going to pass in a new typed file, and I'm going to pass in a MIME type of image JPEG. That's not how you spell JPEG. So the server knows what kind of image it is. And then I'm going to pass in a new file, and I'm going to pass in request.newAvatarURI.getPath. Then for my post, I'm going to do a new retrofit callback post, passing in my response type and my bus. And then he's going to override our onResponse here. I'll change his parameter to response, or parameter name, just for cleanliness here. I'm going to, before I do super onResponse, I'm going to say user auth get user, basically the same thing I did before. And then user set avatar URL response.avatar URL, and then I'm going to post what we posted before, and then I'm going to say bus.post new account.user details updated event user. All right, now we have our change password. So, public void change password with a final, or it doesn't need to be final. I don't know why I'm marking everything as final. change password account, change password request, and he's going to simply do api.changePassword, or update password, derp, request, and then a new retrofit callback post. And our retrofit callback post, we need to provide the result type and the bus. And I don't know why that's not working. Wrong first argument. Change password request, change avatar. Oops, this should be change password. I like strongly typed languages. Okay, and then for our override, we're going to override on response. And I'll change this parameter name again because otherwise it's ugly. And then what we're going to do here is, all we're going to do is we're going to say user, or if response.did succeed, then I'm going to say user, or auth.getUser.setHasPassword true. And that's it. All right, now let's log in with external token. So public void login with external token, account.login with external token request, and we'll do api.login with external token, passing in our request, and passing in a new retrofit callback post, passing in our .class for our response and our bus, just like what we did before. And then I'll go ahead and override a method on it. And the method I'm going to override is, of course, going to be our onResponse here. And for our login with external token, we are going to simply do login user, invoke login user with login external token response. Or we can change that to response, so that's less ugly. All right, now let's do our register with external token. Account.register with external token request, and then we're going to go ahead and do api.register external request new retrofit callback post, passing in our result type .class and our bus, just like what we've done with all these other guys. And then we'll go ahead and override our onResponse, and I'll say login user response and response. All right, so those were pretty much the ugliest methods we're going to have to write. Just to give you guys a taste of how it's going to usually be with this, I'm going to show you guys the set register GCM. The register GCM is going to take in an account.update GCM request, and it's going to say api.update GCM, or update GCM registration, passing in request, and then passing in a new retrofit callback post. .class and bus. So only one line of code, and we don't even need to provide that generic type parameter because we're not overriding any members. And that's it. So now let's test it. Let's see if we can log in. Let's go ahead and hit run. It looks like we got an error somewhere. Your web server's login response does not match path. But it does. Hold on, I'm going to go ahead and restart Android Studio. Didn't work either. I'm certain that this is a bug, especially considering how ridiculous it sounds. Because if you actually read it, it's like, your web service login response does not match path. And you look at the path and it's like the same thing. So I think what could be going on is something that I have no idea about. And whenever you have something that could be going wrong that you have no idea about, always try a build clean. So I'm going to go ahead and build clean project. I don't know if this is going to work, but it's just typically a good thing to do when you're running into issues like this, like internal compiler errors. Because I don't think I code that bad that I caused the Java compiler to stop working, because that would be really impressive. So I went ahead and I did a clean and I hit play. Let's see if this works. If it doesn't, it's still a good little tip for you guys, so I'll just leave that in the video. Of course, this build will take a couple seconds longer than usual, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of how much code that you have to write for some of these. But on the other hand, if I didn't... Oh, see, and it worked, because of course it did. But back to what I was saying. This really isn't a whole lot of code when you consider all of the error handling and the synchronization handling and the asynchronicity and all that stuff combined makes this actually not that bad. But anyway, we're now back. So I'm going to go ahead and hit your register. And I'm going to register a Nelson account, Nelson at 3dbuzz.com, and password of test. Let's hit register. And again, it might take a couple seconds because the ASP.NET application might have spooled down. Either way, we should get a response at some point, regardless, based on how the code's written. So I'm sure it's just a matter of just waiting for a second. Another thing that I really recommend people doing is getting an HTTP proxy like Fiddler and setting that up to intercept traffic. All right, and we logged in. So I'm going to go ahead and log out, and I'm going to log in with that account I just made. And it says username and password is incorrect. Let's try to register Nelson2. Username already taken. Okay, I was able to register a secondary account there, which is really cool seeing work, by the way. Let's log in. Let's try that. Maybe I messed up the password a little bit. No, we're definitely getting some sort of exception. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to once over the code a little bit. Log in with username, posts to API login. Make sure I have all of these things spelled out. So client ID, grant type, username. Make sure this is Android, and that's password. Make sure the username and password is set up. Make sure that's not backwards. Make sure that's not backwards. Doesn't seem like it is, so let's see here. So one thing we can do is actually debug this. And I don't know if I've showed you guys much debugging. I'm going to go ahead and set a breakpoint right here and say debug that. And let's go ahead and give it a couple seconds to compile. Actually, I think I'll go ahead and pause the video for this because it might take a second. All right, so let's go ahead and hit OK. And now we're going to launch the debugger. So what you'll see is a waiting for debugger sign for a second. And you see we did log in, which is interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and log out. I'm going to log in again. And here I'm just going to do Nelson and test, hit login. And now the application is paused, and I can inspect all of this stuff. So let's look at the login response. So the username or password was incorrect on this. So I'm going to say run resume program, and I'm going to try my Nelson 2 for this. So now let's look at the login response. I'm just going to hover over it. And you see it succeeded. So the error must be on this call. So I'm going to set a breakpoint here, and I'm going to say run resume program. And then I'm going to hover over this response and see what happened. So here we get an operation error, unknown error. So now we know kind of where the problem is. So I'm going to hit run resume problem, or resume problem. Well, I guess in a way. Resume program. I'm going to jump into retrofit callback.java. I'm going to put a breakpoint here, and then I'm going to come back into getting motion and hit login again. And let's go ahead and see this. So we get a 401 unauthorized. You know what that tells me? That tells me that I messed up the cookie. Or not the cookie, the authorization. So the problem is most likely inside of my module, and it's most likely either here, misspelling student, which I didn't do, or here, misspelling authorization. So let's check this real fast. Well, that's interesting. It looks correct. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and check the login response to see if I even did get a token to begin with. You know, it's interesting, actually. I didn't get anything. Everything is null. So most likely what's going on here is it did succeed, but, oops, I just hit run and stop. Okay. It did succeed, but it seems that my login response isn't getting deserialized properly. So let's go ahead and check this. We have access token right here and error description, and expires. Should be all correct here. And just looking over the code, I see the problem. I did a .access token right there. Let's hit play instead of an access token. Whoops. See, that's why an HTTP debugger would actually be pretty handy right now. I highly recommend people to go and if you're web inclined, check out Fiddler. I used that quite extensively during this development and set it up as a proxy so you can intercept all these calls. So let's do Nelson 2 test and let's log in for once. And we log in. Let's go to our profile and let's go ahead and edit our name to Nelson 3. And we got updated. Let's go ahead and update our avatar. So I'm going to go ahead and change the camera over to that. And then go to camera. And then... oh, that's not going to load, is it? I'm just going to go to gallery. Oh, of course. Maybe if I switch the camera over. All right, camera's being a little buggy, which it likes to do sometimes. Try resetting it, I guess. Make sure that the preview is working. It is. Tap to change. Go to camera. All right, I'm going to restart my emulator. Okay, that did it. And I'm back into my guy. Also note that I was able to log in successfully. It remembered that I was logged in, remembered my auth token, and everything worked. So let's hit take a picture on that, hit OK, hit done, and it seems like we have some slight issues with our avatar here. It looks like the request did succeed. Let's see. My avatar, that actually should have worked for you guys. My avatar isn't working because my web API is still pointing to my local server, which I'm not on right now. So that's why that doesn't work. But we'll get that to work in the next, or I'll get that to work between now and the next video. All right, guys. I'll see you guys in next time. That was a bit of a pain, I know, but it was necessary to get everything working, and I'm glad to see that our API requests are working. So it should be smooth sailing from here, because like I said before, our contact service and our message service are very, very small compared to our account service. So I'll see you guys in the next video.